Chapter 472. Worthy reward. Sonny stared at the blind girl with surprise clearly written on his face. Allowing this surprise to seep into his voice, he asked, "The vine creature, you want to kill that thing? Why would she want to attempt to do something that dangerous?" Cassie nodded. "Yes." He shook his head. "That bastard sprawls through the entire island, its vines buried underground. It is corrupted, which means that our weapons will barely be able to cut it. And if that was not bad enough, the vines produce clouds of deadly poison. Are you sure that you want to attack it?" The blind girl lingered for a few moments, then answered calmly, "It is a corrupted monster indeed. It is terrifying and lethal, yes, but I am sure that we can destroy it with enough preparation. Everyone has weaknesses, after all. That creature is susceptible to fire, for example. There must be other things we might be able to exploit too." Sonny thought for a while, then shrugged. "Fine, I will help your cohort fight the monstrosity on the shipwreck island. I will not promise that we will succeed, though." Cassie sighed. "Then we have a deal. My cohort and I will remain in the desecrated grove until our business here is done. I expect it to take a month at least, maybe more. After, we will return to the sanctuary, recuperate, and proceed to the shipwreck island." She paused for a moment and then added, "And then I will help you challenge the second nightmare." Sonny smiled. "If we don't die before that, you mean?" The blind girl turned back to the roots of the dead tree. "Yes, if we don't die before that." On his way back to the sanctuary, Sonny had a lot to think about. Firstly, there was the fact that he would have to cooperate with Cassie again, which made him feel all sorts of complicated emotions. The manner of their relationship, at least, was set clear. It was purely an alliance of convenience and nothing else. He could put away his resentment for the sake of mutual benefit. After all, Sonny could be a very pragmatic person when he needed to be. Secondly, there was the perspective of returning to the wreck of the ancient ship, this time to do battle with the vine monster that ruled over the island. Sonny knew very well how dangerous that thing was, so he had a lot of preparations to do if he wanted to come out of that fight in one piece. The divine flame augmentation of the cruel sight, however, was going to come in very handy. And lastly, there was the ominous prediction that Cassie had made about both of them dying sometime in winter, or falling into the sky below at least. He didn't even know what to think about that. However, Sonny was not going to let this vision affect his decisions. The last time he had tried to act on the knowledge received through Cassie's prophetic gift did not end well for him, or anyone for that matter. The best thing to do was to keep it in his mind, but continue to act as if nothing had changed. At least he thought that this was the best course. Tired and mentally exhausted from the long journey to and back from the desecrated grove, Sonny approached the sanctuary of Noctis in the middle of the night. His shadow essence reserves were almost depleted, and his head buzzed from all the thoughts swarming inside of it. Landing on the soft grass and hearing the familiar sound of water falling over the edge of the island, Sonny gritted his teeth. Forget about it for now, first things first. The moon was high in the sky, which meant that he was finally going to get his sweet, enchanting reward. His desire to find the source of the miraculous coins the dead chain worm had brought with it to the Iron Hand Island started this whole ordeal, and now the coins would be its end. His prize was waiting for him up ahead. Entering the sanctuary, Sonny walked through the empty garden and approached the clear pond in its center. Stopping for a couple of moments to make sure that no one was watching him, he then crossed the stone path leading to the small island in its center. There, a white altar stood in the shade of an ancient tree, and an obsidian knife lay on its surface. The moment of truth. Sonny summoned the covetous coffer, took out one of the gold coins out of it, and placed it on the altar. The coin shimmered, reflecting the moonlight, and then disappeared. Your shadow grows stronger. A big smile appeared on Sunny's face. Summoning the runes, he read. Shadow Fragments, 224/2000. It works. Initially, Sunny thought of going about using the coins in a slow and deliberate manner, throwing a dozen or so on the altar each time he had to return to the real world, to minimize the chances of being noticed and, well, as arising suspicion. But now that the reward was in his sight, he decided against it. No, he wanted all of it right now. He deserved it. Putting the wooden box on the altar, he turned it to the side and then put his hand inside. A moment later, a stream of golden coins flowed onto the white surface. Then they all started to disappear. Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger. Your shadow grows stronger. In the end, Sunny ended up sacrificing all 1,400 or so coins to the altar. Frightened to believe that it actually happened, he summoned the runes again, then rubbed his eyes and read the line describing his shadow fragments 3 times in a row, just to make sure that his eyes weren't deceiving to him. Luckily, they weren't. The runes now showed. Shadow Fragments, 1657/2000. I did it, I did it. In the first 2 months on the Chained Isles, Sunny worked really hard to hunt down nightmare creatures and slay them. And yet, he had only been able to collect 200 fragments. His last journey, harrowing as it had been, though gave him so much more. A wide grin appeared on Sunny's face. Who said that greed is a sin? It's a virtue. A goddamn virtue, I say. Because of the sudden influx of so many shards, Sunny got disoriented and swayed. His body was subtly rebuilding itself, growing stronger, more powerful. The difference was stark enough for him to feel it with every fiber of his being. As awakened absorbed soul shards, or shadow fragments in his case, the capacity of their cores grew, and their physical capability was slightly enhanced. Usually, it happened at such small increments that the difference was hard to judge. But this time, Sunny had done something pretty preposterous and consumed 1,400 shadow fragments all at once. He wondered if anyone else in history had accomplished the same feat. Not likely. Grabbing the edge of the altar to support himself, he endured the strange and euphoric sensation as best as he could. How could anyone do such a thing if, as far as Sunny knew, everyone except Nephi's and him were limited to having only one core? They wouldn't even be able to absorb this much. Arg. Back on the Forgotten Shore, Sunny had gone from having almost no shadow fragments to fully saturating his core at 1,000. In the process, he went from being no different from a mundane human to the pinnacle of humanly possible, to breaking past those limits. Becoming an awakened had elevated him even further above what was considered normal. He was much stronger and faster than any mundane human could ever hope to be, and capable of enhancing his prowess even more with essence, achieving truly superhuman might. And now, he went through a transformation that was similar in scale to his rise on the Forgotten Shore, becoming so much more powerful. In fact, he was now probably the strongest awakened both in the waking world and in the dream realm, with the exception of those whose aspects directly enhanced their physique. And even then, he could still double, even triple his physical ability with the help of the shadows. Insane. Sunny drew in a deep breath, then silently flexed his muscles, feeling a new strength course through his veins. He felt incredible, incredibly strong, incredibly fast, incredibly resilient. But that wasn't all. The capacity of both of his shadow cores was also dramatically enhanced, almost doubling in a matter of seconds. Therefore, his reserves of shadow essence were now also much deeper. That meant that he could fight at his peak form for longer, use the active enhancements of his memories more, remain in the form of a shadow for a bigger amount of time, control his shadows at a larger distance, and travel further when using Shadow Step. In short, Sonny had just become even more of a menace. Slowly getting accustomed to his new and improved physique, he couldn't help but smile. Now that he had finally made use of the miraculous coins, his previous disaster of an expedition came into perspective. Despite how much he had suffered and how close he had brushed with death, it all felt worth it somehow. His goal was to grow stronger, and Sonny had just made a big step toward that goal. It felt good. While Sonny was consumed with triumphant thoughts, his gaze fell on the obsidian knife that lay on the altar. He lingered for a while, then cautiously reached with his hand and touched the cold stone handle. Will it work? That knife had remained on the altar of the sanctuary for as long as humans had lived there. Pretty much every awakened that had ever set foot into the citadel had tried to raise it off the white surface at least once, including Sonny. But none of them succeeded. The knife seemed to weigh more than the entire island itself, as if it was glued to the altar. No matter how much people tried, no one had ever managed to move it even by a millimeter. However, when Sonny used the miraculous coins for the first time, he seemed to have noticed that the obsidian knife moved a little. Therefore, he had made a conclusion that if he were to place enough coins on the altar, the knife might become detached from it and fall into his hands. Holding his breath, Sonny wrapped his fingers around the handle. Here goes nothing. Putting all of his strength into the pull, he tried to lift the obsidian blade of the altar. The knife, however, offered no resistance at all. It behaved like any knife would, easily sliding off the white stone, which then caused Sonny to lose his balance and tumble to the ground in a graceless roll. Sitting up, he stared at the knife in his hand with wild eyes. Then he shuddered. Crap! Sonny half expected for the entire sanctuary to suddenly plunge into the sky below, or for the gateway to stop functioning. That's why he wanted to just lift the knife a little, and then place it back down if something had gone awry. Instead, he was now a few steps away from the altar, with no way of getting back to it immediately. Luckily, none of his fears came true. Despite the fact that the obsidian knife had left its usual spot on the altar, the island seemed fine. Everything was just as it had been a few seconds ago. He exhaled with visible relief. Well, good. I wouldn't want to mess things up too bad for everyone here on the chained isles. Rising to his feet, Sonny looked at the obsidian knife. It seemed to have been cut from a single piece of black stone, with its blade sharpened and polished. There wasn't anything special in how the knife looked. In fact, it seemed a little bit crude, almost primitive. There was also one little problem. The knife did not turn into a memory. Sonny had expected it to disintegrate into a rain of sparks and enter his core, just like Weaver's mask had done, or like shard memories behaved when raised by a new wielder. Mordred had mentioned something to that effect when speaking about the ivory knife in the Night Temple. He told Sonny that one had to spill blood on the black altar to receive a memory of the blade that rested on its surface. But the obsidian knife did no such thing. It just remained in his hand, as material and palpable as one could imagine. What was even stranger, though, was that the knife didn't appear to have a spell weave. It was, without a doubt, a magical item. Sonny could feel that it was, even if he didn't know what properties that entailed. However, when he looked beneath the surface of the knife, he didn't see the familiar pattern of ethereal strings weaving themselves around anchoring lights. What he saw instead was just brilliant radiance, as though the knife was filled to the brim with soul essence. And in that radiance was just a single string. It wasn't the same type of ethereal string, though. It was Sonny frowned. A string of fate. A single string of fate was somehow placed inside the obsidian knife, folding on itself endlessly, with its two ends connected to create a perfect, never-ending circle. Sonny stared at the strange string for a while, and then furrowed his brow. Now, what is that all about? Sonny studied the obsidian knife for a while and concluded that he had no idea what this thing was supposed to be capable of. It wasn't a memory, and it didn't have a weave, so neither the spell nor his own ability to perceive and somewhat understand such things could help him. The only thing Sonny knew for certain was that someone had plucked a string from the tapestry of fate and placed it inside the knife, making a circle out of it, for some mysterious purpose. Everything else was going to have to wait until the next time he heard from Mordred. The lost prince was bound to know more about the obsidian knife, since he seemed to know a lot about the chained isles and their past in general. Now, however, Sonny had to deal with another problem. He had to explain the disappearance of the knife to the White Feather clan somehow. Come morning, or at any moment really, if someone decided to leave the dream realm or entered it in the middle of the night, people would become aware that the knife that no one had been able to lift or move was now gone. Sonny had no doubt that it was not going to take a long time for them to figure out that it was him who had taken it. And after that, what to do? In the end, he came up with a really crazy idea, something that he would have never even considered in normal circumstances, something that went against his very nature. He went and told Master Roan the truth. Well, the part that had to do with the miraculous coins, to be precise. Visiting the White Feather compound in the middle of the night was a bit strange, but luckily for him, the older man turned out to be up. He was preparing to leave on a patrol, and so rose early to make the necessary preparations. After Sonny was done talking, the mighty griffin rider stared at him for a while with a perplexed expression. Then, he asked to take a look at the knife. Sonny reluctantly handed the obsidian blade over and watched nervously as Master Roan inspected it. He was really hoping that the White Feather clan would not decide to keep it. There were very few things Sonny could do if they did. Finally, the strapping master returned the obsidian knife to him and asked curiously, "So you managed to lift it by using Nocti's coins on the altar?" Sonny nodded. "Yeah, wait, you know about the coins?" Master Roan nodded. "A few have been found here and there on the Isles over the years. It seems that this was the preferred currency people who lived here thousands of years ago used. No one had ever discovered a literal treasure trove of them, though, as you did." He thought for a bit and then smiled. "Actually, I think I have one stashed somewhere. Wait here for a bit, all right." With that, Roan disappeared into the stone chateau, and then returned 10 or so minutes later, holding a familiar golden coin in his hand. "Found it. I used to carry it with me a lot before as a lucky charm. Let's go." Together, they returned to the altar island. The first thing Master Roan did was glance at the moon, and then place the coin on the altar. Once again, it gleamed and disappeared, leaving a bewildered expression on the handsome man's face. "I'll be damned, I just received a bit of soul essence. You were right." He shook his head in astonishment. To think that these coins had such a use all this time, and no one was the wiser. Good job, Sunless. Then Master Roan hesitated for a few moments and asked, "Can you place the knife back on the altar?" Sonny did as he was asked, and then watched as the mighty griffin rider used all of his formidable power in a vain attempt to lift the obsidian blade off the white surface. When he was done with that futile attempt and stepped back to catch his breath, Sonny simply took hold of the handle and retrieved the knife without any problem. Interesting. Then came the moment of truth. Sonny tensed as he waited for the older man's decision. After thinking about it for a while, Master Roan said, "Well, I don't know if you know this, Sunless, but there is a sacred rule among us awakened in the dream realm. The sanctity of this rule is unassailable and beyond reproach, and that rule is finders keepers." Sonny blinked. "What?" The strapping master grinned. "So you don't have to worry about either me or Tyrus taking that knife from you." Then, however, his smile dimmed. Other people, though, might not be as reasonable. Even if no one knows what power this thing has, or if there even is anything special about it, someone might get too excited and act in a regrettable manner. So I'd advise you to put the knife back on the altar until the time you feel like using it. Sonny considered his words and had to admit that this, indeed, would be the best decision for now. Master Roan helped him confirm that no one else would be able to take the knife, and carrying it around before venturing into the nightmare had no benefit. Summoning the memory of how exactly the obsidian blade had been placed on the altar, he put it in its previous spot and took a step back. Master Roan nodded. Good choice. Please, do tell us if you find out anything about its purpose, at least if it has anything to do with the well-being of the sanctuary. If need be, we'll compensate you fairly to either take the knife off your hands or lend it for a bit, if that's what you prefer. Sonny agreed to this condition, since it sounded reasonable. With that out of the way, the strapping griffin rider looked at him with sparks dancing in his eyes. So, what are you going to do now? Sonny frowned. What a weird question. Go home, take a shower, deal with some real-world business. Why, what are you going to do? Master Roan laughed. What do you mean, what I am going to do? I'm going to go on my patrol, and then I'll go coin hunting, of course. I suspect that everyone in the sanctuary is going to be searching for Nocti's coins like madmen for quite some time after that discovery of yours. People are going to get really busy. Sonny remained silent for a bit, and then said in a very serious tone, Good luck, then. Oh, and one thing. If you find a big chest full of them, make your griffin stomp on it a few times before coming closer. Better yet, do that to every chest you encounter in the future. Never trust a chest not to eat you, is what I am trying to say. I sure won't. With that, he said goodbye to the handsome master, placed his hand on the altar, and returned to the real world. There was a lot he had to do there. Some time later, Sonny was in his kitchen, eating the breakfast he had just prepared. He was thinking of all the things on his to-do list. They were, in no particular order, selling the soul shards he had brought with him from the dream realm, and setting up a stable method to sell more in the future, returning to the dreamscape to participate in duels on the professional arenas to practice shadow dance and feed the mantle of the underworld with victories, observing Rain and thinking of a way to deal with that whole situation, learning how to properly fight with a spear, visiting Neff, writing a report about the Nocti's coins for teacher Julius. There were probably more things he had to do but was forgetting, but he already had enough on his plate. Finishing the breakfast and staring toward the door of the guest bedroom, where Effie still slept while her spirit wandered the dream realm, he shook his head and went out to sit on the porch as he drank some delicious tea. It was early morning. Sonny enjoyed the pleasant view of the Terrace district, watched as Rain walked to the public transport hub on her way to school, and then activated his communicator. He was going to start with the simplest of tasks. Navigating to the market section of the network, he habitually input his identification number to access the awakened section of it. Sonny had browsed the wares there before, even if back then he barely had enough money to buy anything. Today, however, things were different. Today, he was approaching the network as a seller, not as a buyer. Sonny entered soul shards as the keywords and stared at the listings, appreciating the number of zeros in their prices. It seemed as though the value of shards was not uniform, of course. The higher-rank shards cost much more. But people, strangely, also seemed to care about what nightmare creature the crystal came from and how it had been defeated. What the hell? Apparently, there were collectors among the wealthy mundane humans who were very interested in this sort of thing. Some superstitious awakened also believed, for some reason, that absorbing bad shards would be detrimental to the purity of their souls. Weirdos. Sonny didn't know a lot of things, but one thing he did know was that there was not a single awakened out there with a pure soul. Even the best of them were murderers by nature, and their hearts were painted black by the nightmares they had experienced. Not to mention that there were no bad or good soul shards. They were all pretty much the same, coming from terrible monsters and earned through bloodshed. Anyway, that was something he was going to consider when creating his own listing. After getting the gist of the pricing, Sonny opened the form to create his own digital shop. Without thinking too much, he named it Brilliant Emporium and went on to fill out the entire form. Then it came the time to put his soul shards into the auction. Sonny wrote simply, 4 soul shards coming from a fallen devil mordant mimic. The creature was killed and eaten by the proprietor of the Brilliant Emporium himself. Before that, the mordant mimic had been pretending to be a treasure chest and devouring those lured by the promise of treasure. In the end, it bit off more than it could chew. Satisfied with that, he finalized the listing and stared at it for a bit, as if expecting someone to bid instantly. However, nothing of the sort happened. With a sigh, Sonny deactivated the communicator and went back inside. Soon I will be rich soon. It took several days for all 4 of his soul shards to sell. After that, Sonny had to arrange secure delivery, which was somewhat of a headache on its own. Overall, the process took too much time from his already packed schedule. He also felt that he was missing some crucial knowledge on how to make his business really boom. Even though the product he was trying to sell was first class, there were not a lot of fallen rank soul shards out there compared to dormant and awakened ones. The bidding had not really taken off. He did make a sizable amount of money, but not as sizable as it could have been. Still, it was enough to purchase a couple of cheap lower-rank memories. Sonny simply looked for the most useless ones, which no one else would ever want to buy, and made the minimum offer. Whoever it was selling them must have been happy beyond belief to finally be rid of these things. Sonny was going to feed the memories to Saint immediately after receiving them, but before that, he spent a lot of time training with the cruel sight in his underground dojo. He had a solid understanding of how to use a short sword, but a spear was an alien beast to him. Even though Sonny knew the basic rules of combat technique and could perform somewhat effectively while wielding any weapon, he was far, far away from mastering them. How fortunate it was, then, that he had a renowned spear master, raised by wolves herself, crashing in his guest bedroom. Granted, she couldn't really spar with him due to her condition, but he had Saint for that. In the end, the 3 of them spent a lot of time in his basement. Effie was observing and explaining to him what to do, how to do it, and most importantly, what not to do. Saint served as his opponent and the mighty enemy to polish his nascent skill against. And Sonny found himself once again in the role of a willing punching bag. It was just like in that week they had spent in the hidden chamber of the ruined cathedral in the Dark City. Sonny even got nostalgic, remembering how cozy and nice things had been back then. Now, however, things were much better. Not only was there an unlimited amount of delicious food they could eat during the breaks in his training, there were even medicine and ice baths to ease the pain in his bruised and beaten body. Training with Saint was really effective, but she really didn't know how to pull her punches. Just like that, a few days passed. And then, something that Sonny had been dreading for a while finally, and inevitably, happened. It was time to accompany Kai to the premiere of The Song of Light and Darkness. Sometime later, Sonny was pondering his life choices while sitting in the back row of a crowded theater. The lights were already off, which obviously meant nothing to him. People seemed to be really excited to see the movie, though, especially Effie, who was to his side, munching on something called popcorn and staring at the screen. In the darkness, somber music started to play, reverberating through the entire space and making the audience shiver. Effie suddenly jabbed her elbow into his ribs. "Do you know who is the composer for this thing? It's Griffin. I don't know how they managed to get him, but he scored the entire movie. Such an honor. Can you believe it?" Sonny had no idea who this Griffin guy was, but judging by Effie's reaction, he was someone famous. Massaging his ribs with a grimace, Sonny offered a stifled answer. I can. On the screen, the interior of a spacious and beautifully lit room appeared. A small girl with silver hair was playing on a carpet, while a handsome man with dark circles under his eyes was shown studying a map. What the hell? Was that supposed to be Nephi's? If so, her hair should have been black. It only turned silver after her first nightmare. Effie giggled. So cute. The girl, meanwhile, approached the table and reached to touch the strange sword that lay on it. The blade of the sword was short and misshapen, as though shattered a long time ago. Before the girl could cut herself, though, the man lifted the sword and brought it out of her reach. This is not a toy, Nephi's. Sonny palmed his face and grimaced. But Daddy, why is your sword broken? The man smiled. So what if it is broken? It is still sharp. Then he put his hand on the girl's shoulder and looked at her with a very serious expression. One day you will wield a sword too, darling. When you do, remember one thing. We, awakened, only raise arms to protect humanity. As long as we don't give up, no matter how dire the situation is, there will be hope. Just like this sword, humanity is more resilient than it seems. Sonny tilted his head. Wait, this doesn't even make sense. The scene, however, was already over. The screen turned black for a few moments, and the movie transitioned into the future. Nephi's, now a languid jade beauty with a slim waist, generous figure, long eyelashes, and mesmerizing gray eyes, was entering the academy. What followed was a long training montage, showing her defeating every other sleeper there with a training sword, all the while offering words of wisdom. Like never give up hope, or remember your duty, or we are humans. The propaganda was so tacky, and laid so thick Sonny couldn't help but cringe. The only person the Jade Beauty couldn't defeat was a handsome young man with masculine features, broad shoulders, and a noble bearing, Hanley Castor. Oh no, oh no. Sonny should have guessed by the invitation Kai had given him, but the director of the movie was obviously hinting at the nascent romantic feelings between the two. Their conversations in the academy seemed to be about swordsmanship, but were also somehow deeply flirtatious. The actors had mad chemistry together. He wanted to vomit, but the audience was clearly enthralled by the two leads. Sonny didn't dwell on this preposterous thing for long, though, because right about then, his own character was introduced. What the spell is this? The actor hired to play him was a literal child. It was a teenage boy of about 13 years of age, with a mischievous grin and a face that, for lack of better words, simply begged to be punched. Worse than that, he was shown as extremely uneducated, clumsy, and naive. In short, Sonny was the comic relief. He turned to Effie in outrage, only to see her laughing silently. Oh man, who's the casting director for this movie? I need to send them flowers. Even his shadows were laughing, both of them. Sonny gritted his teeth, promised to exact revenge on Kai and Effie for making him endure this, and turned back to the screen. Finally, Nephi's entered the dream realm and found herself on the forgotten shore. The coral labyrinth and the dark sea were recreated with such detail that he couldn't help but shiver. Well, they did their research at least. The audience was holding their breaths during Neph's journey to the Dark City. The terrifying nature of the dark tides and the deadly battles with awakened nightmare creatures populating the labyrinth created a truly tense, suffocating atmosphere. Of course, everyone knew that the main character was not going to die in the first half of the movie, but that's where Sonny, as well as Cassie, came into play. Just as he had expected, the movie showed them as a burden that had to be carried by Nephi's on her heroic journey. But since very few people knew who Sonny was, his fate was uncertain. Nephi's was bound to survive, but what about her friends? And thanks to his character, there were also moments of pleasant levity amidst all the tension. A few times, the whole audience exploded with laughter after Sonny on the screen did something especially stupid or said something really outrageous. He had also slowly developed a catchphrase. It was, "Are you crazy?" That not only allowed the audience to chuckle, but also gave Nephi's the opportunity to educate her worthless follower, thus naturally delivering a lot of necessary exposition. The real Sonny wasn't amused, though, because they weren't laughing with him, they were laughing at him. Idiots, what do you even know? They didn't know anything. Since no one really knew what the three of them had gone through on their way to the Dark City, the writer simply came up with some dire dangers for Nephis to overcome. Eventually, though, they made it to the ancient city and met Effie. Effie was played by a very tall, athletic, and attractive actress. The way she played her, though, was a sight to behold. Basically, the actress went out of her way to portray the huntress as a charismatic, but not very bright savage who was all brawn and no brain. All she knew how to do was fight, eat, and break things. Sonny turned to Effie and grinned, full of malice and gloating. This was the first time he had ever seen the boisterous young woman, completely mortified. Casting director, you say? I think I'll send them flowers, too. After Nephis reached the Dark City and the huntress was introduced, both Sonny and Effie watched the rest of the movie with bleak expressions. The second act took place in the outer settlement and was dedicated to Neph's heroic attempts to protect and inspire the young men and women trapped there. There were a lot of impassioned speeches, blood-chilling expeditions into the Dark City, and tense altercations with Gunlog's forces. There were also a lot of shenanigans from young Sonny to the delight of the audience. At some point, people started to scream, "Are you crazy?" along with him. And a bit later, there was a sort of comical moment of growth for the character when he asked, "Am I crazy?" instead and went along with Nephis without offering his usual critique, which was met with cheers. Most of this part of the movie, though, was dedicated to the genuine respect and camaraderie that blossomed between Nephis and Castor in this dire time. With the handsome male lead as her right hand, Changing Star successfully united the people of the outer settlement, reminded them what it meant to be humans, and challenged Gunlog to save boisterous Effie from unjust imprisonment. The duel itself was choreographed somewhat well, even if it had nothing to do with the real thing. The moves both the radiant heroine and the cruel tyrant used were flashy and dramatic, and expressed the mood well, but anyone trying to actually fight like that would probably risk having their enemy die of laughter. The third act showed the siege of the Crimson Spire, the heroic stand of the warriors of the first line in Effie, Kai's battle in the skis with the Spire messengers, and Neph and Castor fighting back to back, slaying dozens and dozens of nightmare creatures together. The audience seemed to have forgotten to breathe, and even Sonny had to admit that the battle scene was filmed especially well, showcasing the chaos, horror, and terrible toll of human lives that such a massacre was bound to reap. Many side characters that people had already grown to love died heroically, and he even heard a few sobs coming from the darkness. Enhanced by the beautiful music, the atmosphere was not tragic, though. On the contrary, it was triumphant and exalted, as if to die in this way was the highest honor a human could receive. A bit uncomfortable, Sonny shifted in his seat. That Griffin guy really knows how to make a tune. When the situation was the most desperate, with the dark water rising and threatening to drown all the surviving warriors, a sudden change happened. The sea suddenly retreated, and the monsters started to fall to the ground. Castor, covered in blood and wounds, looked at Nephis and whispered, "My lady, the sun." Indeed, the sun had suddenly turned menacingly red, its light eradicating the remaining nightmare creatures and assaulting the humans. For the first time in the entire movie, an uncertain and desperate expression appeared on Changing Star's face. Salvation came from someone who the audience would have never expected to see do something so profound. A clear ringing of the bell resounded in the air, and the small figure of clumsy, useless Sonny could be seen near the tower, waving his hand in the air. The survivors rushed toward the crimson spire and entered inside. There Nephi's looked up and then turned to Sonny. Someone has to stall the terror so that everyone could escape. I will do battle with that nightmare, but there's an important task you must complete. Lead all these people to the gateway. Sonny on the screen looked at Changing Star with fear. Lady Nephi's, are you crazy? I am just a clumsy kid from the outskirts. How can you entrust something so important to someone like me? Sonny in the real world suppressed an infuriated groan. People in the audience, though, were rather emotional. You can do it, Sonny. You got this, kid. You're a great scout, don't sell yourself short. On the screen, the beautiful actress playing Nephi's looked down on the comical, slightly pathetic boy in front of her and put her hand on his shoulder. We, awakened, must rise to the occasion to protect humanity. As long as we don't give up, no matter how dire the situation is, there will be hope. I believe in you, Sonny. You are capable of much more than you think. With that, she left the survivors and went off to fight the terror, while Sonny guided everyone to the gateway. And somewhere in the process, Castor left the group to aid Changing Star in battle. The last scenes of the movie cut between the 100 survivors fighting their way to the gateway, and the tragic duo battling the terrifying creature at the top of the spire. Many people in the audience were crying, knowing full well that neither of them was going to return to the real world. In the end, Castor heroically sacrificed himself to protect Nephi's, breaking the hearts of so many viewers. The survivors found the gateway and escaped seconds before it was destroyed. The last shot showed bloodied Neph walking out of the tower, holding a broken sword in her hand. As she gazed at the forgotten shore, a lone tear rolled down her cheek. As long as we don't give up, there is hope. The screen turned black, and in the next moment the audience exploded with applause. Sonny stared at all those people, many of them applauding with tears in their eyes, with a strange expression on his face. Did they actually like that crap? He turned to Effie, lingered for a moment and asked, did you like it? The former huntress gave him a long look. Then she said, what am I, an idiot? Of course I didn't like it, it's such a piece of crap. Sonny exhaled with relief. At least there was one other sane person in this theater. After the movie was over, Kai appeared to deafening applause and gave a short speech, congratulating the director and the crew of the movie, and then inviting them on the stage for a short Q&A. Sonny stared at the director of this travesty, seriously considering silently assassinating him for a few moments. Then he glanced at Effie, who, judging by her face, was thinking the same. He lingered for a few moments, then asked, what do you want to do? The young woman inhaled deeply, turned to him and smiled. I am hungry, let's go eat. Together, they snuck out of the screening hall and went to find the theater's restaurant. There were a lot of people there who, just like them, had decided to skip the PR portion of the event and were now enjoying food and drinks, discussing the movie with lively expressions. Sonny and Effie got themselves something to eat and sat at an empty table, then grew quiet for a while. Each was preoccupied with their own thoughts. Now that Sonny had a little time to digest the movie, his anger subsided a bit. In fact, he was even happy. Sure, the way he was portrayed in the story was as far from the truth as it could have been, and more than a little bit humiliating. But, in a way, this was exactly what he needed. Now that Nephi's had become his master, he didn't have to hide his strength and true name that much. But he still preferred to remain in the shadows, not only because there was a possibility of becoming masterless again, but also because it was the best way to be in the world so full of hidden dangers and powerful enemies. Being renowned would make a lot of things difficult for him, and make every battle he fought after that harder. After all, there was no better advantage than being underestimated by the enemy. From that point of view, the ridiculous way in which he was portrayed in the movie was a blessing. It made the possibility of anyone thinking highly of him that much lower. Of course, not everyone was going to watch that travesty, but many would, and their opinion was going to spread. Who would believe that Changing Star's bumbling sidekick was, in fact, one of the most dangerous awakened alive, and thus consider him as a serious threat? Pretty much no one. So, in fact, the director of the Song of Light and Darkness unintentionally did him a favor. Satisfied with that conclusion, Sonny looked around. He saw several people looking at Effie with stunned expressions, clearly gathering their courage to come and introduce themselves. But no one had yet. He could hear their whispers, though. "Look, it's her, raised by wolves." "Oh my. I heard about her situation, but to actually see, she is so brave." Effie herself was strangely quiet. She ignored the whispers, then looked at him and asked, "Hey, Sonny, can I ask you something?" Sensing that this was not going to be a simple question, he tensed a little and then said, "Sure, what is it?" Effie hesitated for a few moments, then lowered her voice so that no one would be able to overhear. "Did Castor really leave to help Nephi's?" Sonny stared at his friend for a bit, then shook his head. "No, he left to make sure that she dies." Effie inhaled deeply. "I see." She didn't continue that conversation, as though his answer confirmed something that she had already suspected. Well, despite her often boorish demeanor and the way she was portrayed in the movie, Effie was anything but stupid. In fact, she was extremely intelligent, cool-headed, and cunning. Otherwise, she would have never survived for 3 long years alone on the streets of the Dark City. It was only natural for her to have suspicions, considering how much she knew. Luckily, Effie did not ask anything else. Mostly because of a strange man who entered the restaurant, looked around, noticed their table, and walked over with gleaming eyes. Oh no, another fan of Raised by Wolves. The man stopped in front of them, glanced at Effie, and then turned to Sonny with an awed expression. "Hey, are you awake and sunless?" Sonny blinked. "What?" "Oh, yes." A bright smile appeared on the man's face. "Oh my, oh goodness, it is such an honor. I am such a huge fan of yours." "What is happening?" Sonny stared at the beaming man, trying to comprehend what he was saying. Misjudging his expression, the man hurriedly said, "Oh, sorry, I was so nervous that I forgot to introduce myself. I am a writer, in fact. It was I who wrote the screenplay for A Song of Light and Darkness, and it's all thanks to you." Effie stared at Sonny with an expression that didn't promise him anything good and asked in a sweet voice, "Oh, all thanks to him, really? How come?" "I'm in trouble." The man's smile grew even wider. "Exploration report on the Forgotten Shore. Ah, it is such a brilliant piece of academic work. I based most of my research on your profound work, Awakened Sunless. Everyone on the crew and everyone in the cast read it at least once. I even insisted on giving you the co-writer credit, but sadly it was impossible, due to you not being a member of the Screenwriters Guild. But fret not. I'll let everyone know that if it weren't for you, this movie wouldn't exist." Sonny stared at the man with wide eyes, and then said in a weak voice, "Please don't." But it was of no use. "Ah, you are so humble, so modest. Well, of course, what else would I expect from a researcher as talented as you? But it wouldn't be right for me to receive all the praise. No, people must know." He looked at the restaurant and proclaimed, not even trying to keep his voice down, "that it is you, Awakened Sunless, who they must thank for being able to enjoy our wonderful film." Sonny looked at the floor. "I guess I am going to have to kill Kai. Or wait, no. Actually, that probably makes us even after the whole mongrel disaster." Luckily for Sonny, Kai was finished with his business soon, and they were able to leave the theater for a more private space. Otherwise, there might have been civilian casualties at the premiere of the Song of Light of Darkness. After that damn writer had announced Sonny's identity to everyone in the restaurant, the amount of people asking him to say, "Are you crazy?" to their faces almost pushed him to the brink. In any case, soon he found himself in a sophisticated lounge in the company of Effie, Kai, and Aiko. The petite girl looked very sharp in a fashionable business suit and radiated a sense of cold professionalism that made people think twice before approaching laid-back and friendly Kai, which, Sonny supposed, was a big part of being an idol's manager. When they were seated, the idol in question gave them a guilty look. "Well, it wasn't that bad, was it?" Effie smiled at him and said sweetly, Sure, but also, the only reason you're still alive is that it would be a chore to clean the blood off my wheelchair." Kai chuckled nervously and glanced at Sonny. "What about you?" Sonny shrugged. "I don't mind. Actually, I'm happy to be portrayed as a bumbling fool." The charming Archer blinked. "Really?" Sonny gave him a serious nod. "Of course, it's easier to fool people who think that you're the fool, so I don't mind." Kai looked away in embarrassment. "Anyway, you don't have to worry too much, really. These types of films are usually made to boost public morale. No one is really going to take them seriously. Even mundane people understand the difference between reality and fiction when it comes to the awakened." Sonny laughed. "Sure, when they want to." He was a mundane person for most of his life too, after all. And even though he grew up in the outskirts, he used to consume cheap entertainment just like everyone else in the waking world. Yes, he knew how to recognize propaganda and what to not take seriously. But at the same time, many things that had nothing to do with the truth found their way into his mind and silently became beliefs. That was how well-engineered falsehoods worked. They spent some time chatting and joking about especially ridiculous moments in the movie, and at the right moment, Sonny said, "By the way, I talked to Cassie. She's in, but we'll need to do it before winter, so -1 month for preparations." Effie smiled. "Good news, I'll start packing then. I am south of Bastion right now, so it will take me 2-3 months to get to the Chained Isles, unless one of you knows a friendly local saint." Sonny thought about St. Tyrus and remained silent. No, that woman frightened him too much to ask for a favor. He wondered how Master Jed had managed to convince her in the first place. Kai nodded. "We can meet in Bastion and travel north together. It will be safer." Aiko, meanwhile, was looking at them with a confused expression on her delicate face. "Travel north, do it before winter. What are you talking about?" A guilty expression suddenly appeared on the charming Archer's face. I haven't mentioned it before, but basically I am going to join Sonny, Effie, and Cassie too to challenge the second nightmare." Aiko stared at him with a shocked expression. "Not to steal from Sonny, but are you crazy? Have you told the agency?" Kai smiled weakly. "No, I was hoping that you would tell them actually. They'll listen to you. Isn't it a good thing, really, for public relations? Plus, as a master, I won't have to visit the dream realm every day." The petite girl scoffed. "If you survive." Then she glanced at Sonny and Effie and shook her head. Who am I kidding? I guess I'll be jobless again soon. You guys have fun for a bit, I'll go get a drink." With that, she rose and went toward the bar. Sonny thought for a bit, then rose too. "I'll go keep her company." Kai gave him a thankful smile. "I appreciate it. What does he think I am going to do?" Sonny gave his friend a confused look, then followed Aiko. Of course, he wasn't doing it out of consideration. In fact, he wanted to talk to her about something in private. When he approached the bar and stood near the petite girl, she gave him a dirty look. "Whatever it is, no, hell no." Sonny blinked. What do you mean? Aiko smiled crookedly. I know that look of yours. The last time you looked at me like that, Stev and I almost ended up as the Blood Lord bait. What, do you want me to join your suicide crusade? He shook his head. No, no, nothing of the sort. In fact, it's about your job. The petite girl raised an eyebrow. Oh. Sonny nodded. Well, since there's a possibility of you losing a part of your income, and Kai tells me that you are really good at managing stuff, how would you like to help me manage a blossoming new business? Aiko looked at him with a dubious expression. Are you opening an assassination agency? He almost choked. What? What made you think that? No, I just found a way to move items between the real world and the dream realm. My dream, if you need to know, is to become the proprietor of an elite memory stores. The petite girl stared at him with wide eyes. Really? Sonny frowned. Yes, really. Why can't I have a dream? Just imagine sitting safely in a fashionably decorated store without having to risk my skin in the dream realm and have tons of money simply flow into my hands. That's the stuff dreams are made of, is it not? Aiko shook her head with a bewildered expression on her face. I guess. Sonny smiled. You understand. The others might think that it's silly, but I know you wouldn't, as a former business owner yourself. Anyway, I won't have a large enough arsenal of memories for a while, but I can start creating a reputation for the store already. A brand name, or whatever it's called. So I just sold 4 fallen soul shards on the network from a devil I killed and ate. But for some reason, that bastard's shards did not fetch a really good price. Aiko looked at him with a frown. Well, what category of the vendor license did you apply for? Who's your appraiser? What's your feature strategy, SEO approach, pool of endorsements? He remained silent for a bit, then said, You see, you said a lot of words, and most of them even sound familiar, but I have no idea what you mean. What the hell was she talking about? What's a SEO? Are there different licenses? Wait, do I even need a license? Don't tell me that I need to pay taxes too. The petite girl closed her eyes for a moment. None, you did none of these things. Sonny nodded. It's a miracle that you even managed to sell those shards. He smiled. That's why I need someone smart and resourceful like you to help me. For 5% commission of every sale. Just think about it. How many awakened out there can bring soul shards to the real world and bring spices to the dream realm? Will be rich in no time. Aiko sighed and remained silent for a bit. Then she said, That is a high-risk business venture that wholly depends on 2 unpredictable factors. You staying alive and you continuously hunting down nightmare creatures, which are usually in contradiction to each other. So in normal circumstances, I would have said no. But it is you, I guess. Plus, you have a good relationship with all 3 of the newest named Awakened, as well as a lot of prestige as a member of Changing Stars cohort, and now even some pop culture fame. Aiko shrugged, thought for a long while, and then said categorically, 10%. Sonny grinned and offered her his hand for a handshake. Perfect. Welcome aboard Sonny's brilliant emporium. The petite girl stared at him in shock. Wait, you actually named the store Brilliant Emporium. Can the naming be changed? He shook his head. No, it's non-negotiable, but what's wrong with that name? It's a great name. I think that it's, brilliant. After that night, Sonny became really busy. Delegating, that's the secret of success. That was his thought after Aiko joined the Brilliant Emporium as a manager. With her help, he went through all the necessary paperwork to make his improvised network store seem legit. Sonny noticed the difference right after listing the soul shards he had gathered from the inhabitants of the sanctuary for sale. Not only did they get purchased much faster, but the price was also pleasantly higher than expected. He also didn't need to spend a lot of his severely lacking time on managing sales, delivery, and purchases. Aiko streamlined the process and created a simple and efficient system where he handed her the inventory and the updated information on what items the awakened wanted to receive from him in the dream realm, and she did the rest. While its volume of sales was not overwhelming, the brilliant emporium started functioning as a real business with a constant level of activity and a slowly growing client base. Sunny just had to collect the money and spend it on low-tier memories to feed to Saint. Well, and remain alive while getting the soul shards, of course. Sadly, despite how appreciative of the concept of delegating he became, this was the only part of his busy life that he could entrust to someone else. All the other things he had to do were either too personal or too secretive to recruit anyone to help. No one was going to do his research for him, so Sunny had to spend time writing reports, bringing them to teacher Julius, and working with the old man to make them worthy of being rewarded with contribution points. Nothing had brought him quite as much as the Forgotten Shore report had, but the points were slowly accumulating. Similarly, now that Cassie was gone on a long expedition, he was the only one of Neff's friends, of which there were only two. Really, who could visit her? That was not a burden, but took away some of his time nevertheless. He also kept an eye on the runes describing her status, and saw the number of soul fragments in her possession increase at a frightening speed almost every day. Sunny didn't know where Nephi's was and what she was doing, what kinds of enemies she was fighting, but they must have been as powerful as they were ample in numbers. He had to keep up. Now that he had received a vast boost to his power through sacrificing the miraculous coins to the white altar in the sanctuary of Noctis, less than 400 fragments stood between him and being able to create a third core. That meant that he had to continue venturing into the wilderness of the Chained Isles to hunt down nightmare creatures. Armed with the cruel sight and the ability to infuse its blade with either invisible soul damage or radiant divine flame, he was now able to go further than he had before and challenge creatures that previously he chose to avoid. Their deaths rewarded him with shadow fragments, while their bodies gifted him soul shards that were then sold and converted into memories, and through those, into shadow fragments as well, this time for Saint to consume. It was a virtuous, but exhausting and wildly dangerous cycle. And as if the pressure of having to keep up with changing Star wasn't enough, he also had to continue training, both with the spear, with the help of Effie and his taciturn demon, and without it, to practice shadow dance. That second task, however, had turned out to be much harder than Sunny expected. Before plunging back into the dreamscape, he decided to be careful and check what the situation with Mongrel was. A quick search on the network could tell him if everyone had forgotten about the masked swordsman or not. And as it turned out, they did not. To Sunny's dismay, he found out that in the month of his absence, the people infatuated with Mongrel had not only persisted in their excitement, but also brought it to a whole new, truly ridiculous level. All of them were flooding the network with theories and discussions, and countless individuals, even those who missed out on the initial sensation, were waiting with bated breaths for one glorious moment: the return of Lord Mongrel. With each day that passed, their anticipation only grew stronger. No matter how discreet Sunny could be, once he appeared in the dreamscape, it was going to create too much noise and attract too much attention. Damn it all, what a disaster! He was on verge of pulling his hair out in despair. It was worth remembering that the persona of Mongrel, oh irony, had been created to help him stay anonymous, potentially in order to safely glean secrets about the sovereigns in the future. What a joke it was, that the faceless phantom he created ended up being much more famous and recognizable than its creator. In any case, the situation was seriously messing up Sunny's plans. He simply couldn't use Dreamscape, which caused his progress with Shadow Dance and the mantle of the underworld to stall. And if that wasn't enough, there was another unexpected problem he encountered. That one wasn't as inconvenient and pernicious, but made him worry a lot for whatever reason. It was that Sonny had not heard from Mordred again after returning from the ivory tower. Despite the fact that several weeks had passed, the lost prince remained gone. Sonny's head, once again, had only one voice resounding in it, his own. Usually, that would have been a good sign, but Mordred's absence made Sonny tense and full of vaguely bad premonitions. What could have happened to his mysterious helper? Was he simply unable to establish contact outside of the sky below and the Ivory Island, or had something happened to him? There was no answer. Sonny even took out the mirror shard from the covetous coffer and smeared a few drops of blood on it, to no result whatsoever. The piece of mirror remained the same, absolutely dark, and refusing to reflect anything. It was after one of these fruitless attempts that Sonny left Effie to enjoy the dinner he had cooked for them by herself, and went out to sit on the porch in a dark mood. It was early evening, and shadows were slowly growing longer and deeper. Maybe because of his exhaustion, or maybe because of how used he was to being safe in his home, but Sonny got consumed by thoughts and lost track of his surroundings, something that rarely happened. That was why he was so shocked to hear someone's voice just a few meters away. "What are you staring at?" Sonny blinked a few times, then focused his sight on the person who had addressed him. In front of him, at a bit of distance, just between the sidewalk and the path leading to his porch, stood a 14-year-old girl in a school uniform, with black hair and dark eyes, and a very unamused expression on her pale face. Sonny's chest grew cold. Crap! It was Rain. Looking right at Sonny, she sighed and repeated, "I said, what are you staring at? Brat, what is she doing here? Why is she talking to me?" Although Sonny was panicking on the inside, none of the emotions reflected on his face. Armed with the extensive experience of deceit, manipulation, and facing terrifying nightmare creatures in melee, he kept a straight face, threw a dark look at Rain, and calmly said, "I am not staring at anything. And who are you calling a brat, you brat? Respect your elders." The girl scoffed. "What elders? You're obviously younger than me." Sonny opened his eyes wide in outrage. Ouch! He knew that he looked younger than his age, but to be mistaken for a middle schooler, that was just too much. It was getting dark, so maybe that was the reason for her mistake. Rain, meanwhile, was not done speaking. "And you were definitely staring at me with a very nasty expression. I almost tripped. Didn't your parents teach you not to stare?" Sonny opened his mouth, then closed it again, then opened it once more. "First of all, I am 18. Second, I was just zoning out and thinking about stuff, adult stuff that a youngster like you would not even understand. And lastly, my parents taught me all they needed to teach me, but what do they have to do with any of this? They're not here." Rain mockingly raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah, you live in this big house all alone." Sonny furrowed his brow. "Not only do I live in this house alone, I also own it." But right at that moment, Effie suddenly shouted from inside, "Sonny, come eat, dinner is getting cold." He froze, then felt the tips of his ears growing hot. "Damn it, Effie. That's a guest of mine. She's staying over for reasons." Rain stared at him for a few moments with a funny expression on her face, then asked, "Your name is Sonny?" Sonny shrugged, trying to appear as indifferent as possible. "Sure, why?" She suddenly laughed. "What's so funny?" No, it's just my mom calls me Rainy. What a coincidence." He relaxed. "Oh, for a moment I was afraid that she remembers me, but it doesn't seem that way. Good, that is good." Was he a little bit disappointed? Sonny took out his communicator, pressed a button on it, and threw an etched chip that slid from the slick device to Rain. She was in process of asking another question. "Oh, and by the way, I often see you meandering on the porch and skipping school. Are you a delinquent or WH? Then she caught the chip and stared at it in confusion. What's this? Sonny smiled with a corner of his mouth. Can't you see? That's a government-issued citizenship chip. Now how would I have one if I wasn't of legal age? Rain looked at the chip, then grew even paler than usual. You really are 18. She was so mortified that she even used the proper honorifics. Sonny laughed. Of course I am. As a respectable adult, I never lie. I'm the most honest person in the world, really. The girl seemed like she was currently wishing to sink into the earth. Oh, I am so sorry then, I didn't think. As a child that grew up in a good family, she was most likely taught to be very polite to elders, so this situation was more or less a nightmare. Sonny himself had never associated with types of people who were particular about etiquette, but from what he had seen in Rain's school, among her ilk, social hierarchy and proper rituals were all the rage. Luckily, Effie decided to appear at that very moment to put an end to the awkward situation. Opening the door, she rolled her wheelchair onto the porch while saying angrily, "Listen, doofus, are you going to eat or not? Because if not, I'll eat your portion too, you know." Then she stopped and stared at Rain, then at Sonny. After a few moments, she asked, "Who's your friend?" Sonny rubbed his face. "Eat as much as you want. And this girl lives in the neighborhood. She was just passing by." Rain nodded. "Nice to meet you, ma'am. I am very sorry. I was just on my way home from school and made a mistake. You see what has happened." Effie grinned, then gestured for her to stop talking. "Let me guess. This one right here was zoning out with a nasty expression on his face, and then looked at you and said something wildly inappropriate." Rain blinked a couple of times, then said, "Yes, I mean no, he didn't say anything. It was me, I said something inappropriate." The former huntress shook her head. "Then you're lucky. Sonny here is a bit special, one of a kind. The things that sometimes come out of his mouth." Sonny stared at her in outrage and hissed, "The things that come out of my mouth? You're the one to talk." She sighed, then looked at Rain with a hurt expression on her face. "You see how he bullies me? That's no way to treat a guest, Sonny. So ungracious. What will this nice neighborhood kid even think?" Rain energetically shook her head. No, I won't think anything. I have to go home, actually. It's been nice meeting you." With that, she hurriedly turned around and made a step to walk away. Effie raised her voice a little. "Bye, nice meeting you too. If you feel guilty about the misunderstanding, you can stop by any time. With food, all will be forgiven." Sonny stared at her with wide eyes, not quite believing what he was hearing. Finally, when Rain's figure disappeared behind the green fence, Effie turned to him and smiled. "It's almost like there's a factory somewhere in the city releasing whole batches of tiny, pale, bony teenagers. That girl is almost as pale as you, Sonny. I can't believe it." With that, she shook her head, turned her wheelchair, and went back inside to continue her dinner. Leaving Sonny alone, flabbergasted and trying to determine if he was currently awake. What was that? What just happened? Of all the countless scenarios he had in his head of how his first meeting with Rain would go, this was definitely not one of them. Sonny was too shaken by what had just happened to do anything else today. So he just went down to the basement, entered the dream realm, and remained in his small room in the sanctuary instead of going out to fight nightmare creatures. There he just slept peacefully for the entire night. This was a very strange way to act for Sonny, but many awakened did just that every day. Unless their citadel was under attack, which happened frequently in most parts of the dream realm, or they were assigned a certain duty, people just remained in their quarters, slept, and returned to the real world without throwing themselves into any kind of danger. Others performed various tasks to earn a livelihood in the citadel, all the while staying safe behind its walls. Few, frequently ventured outside and challenged the wilderness of the dream realm. And who could blame them? Most people were made awakened against their will, after all. It was the spell that wanted humans to risk their lives, go through deadly trials and endure terrible suffering, not people themselves. So there was nothing wrong with a person who wanted to stay as safe as possible, for as long as possible. If anything, it was Sonny who behaved abnormally. In any case, he felt refreshed and more balanced when he returned to the real world in the morning. A good night of sleep helped him put his unexpected encounter with Rain in perspective. Yes, it was an unfortunate mistake on his part, and yes, the fact that she now knew his face and name was less than ideal. But truly, nothing too bad had happened. Rain just thought of him as a neighbor, not even an acquaintance, just a stranger. Which was just as Sonny wanted it. To be on the safe side, he could avoid leaving the house for a while altogether. And yet, in the evening, he found himself sitting on the porch again, enjoying the view and a cup of tea, as he had already grown used to. After yesterday, I doubt that she'll ever want to approach this house again, so I should be all right. But as it turned out, he was not. Sonny noticed Rain walking from the public transport terminal long before she came anywhere near his home, because one of his shadows was stationed further down the street to keep a lookout. He sighed, then lowered his eyes and pretended to study the synthwood surface of the porch, hopping to avoid making eye contact with the teenage girl. This time, he was not going to give her a reason to come closer and talk to him. However, it was all for naught. When Rain approached the path leading to his door, she slowed down a bit, hesitated, then turned and walked directly to him. "What the hell?" Sonny raised his head and stared at her with a bit of surprise. "Oh, hi, it's you again." She nodded, then took off her backpack and produced a big food container out of it, seemingly full of something delicious. Then, Rain handed it to Sonny. "Here, my mom made it. Your friend said to bring food, right? Oh, and I'm really sorry, for yesterday." Sonny blinked a couple of times, then took the container from her hands and stared at it for a bit. Damn Effie, who told her to ask for food. I cooked great food for the both of us myself. Then he pretended to smile and said, "Yeah, she did, and no problem, say thanks to your mom." Sonny thought that the conversation would be over after that, but Rain lingered. There was a sort of curious expression on her face. "It's nothing much, just some pasta with mushrooms and cream sauce. My favorite. Sonny, right? I'm Rain, by the way." He looked at the food container again, reevaluating his stance on its existence. Nothing special. He was willing to bet that the ingredients she listed were all natural, too. A far cry from synth-paced people like him, usually consumed to keep their bellies full in the outskirts. Sonny knew a few guys who would kill to eat something like this. His smile became more genuine. "Yup, I'm Sonny. Nice to meet you, Rain." She smiled slightly, hesitated for a few moments, and then asked, "So you're really 18, and live alone in your own house, I mean with that nice friend of yours?" Sonny shrugged. "Sure, she's just staying over until she finds a place of her own, though." "Why?" The girl looked at him with wide eyes. "I mean, aren't you a bit young to live on your own? Aren't your parents worried?" He stared at her for a couple of seconds, then tilted his head a little. "I think that I'm of a perfect age to live on my own. And no, my parents aren't worried about me one bit." Rain smiled, as though hearing the most fascinating thing ever. "But like, who cooks your food? No, wait, who buys your food? Do you get an allowance? Or do you have a stipend from your university? Wait, do you even go to a university? I have so many questions." Sonny mentally groaned. "Questions, I hate questions." Outwardly, though, he remained calm. "What kind of questions are those? Obviously, I buy and cook my food myself. And who needs a university, a stipend? I am a wildly successful young entrepreneur, if you must know. Basically, I do whatever I want." Rain stared at him. And your parent just let you. They're not lecturing you every day about the future, the importance of having a productive career, and how you must be always ready in case you get infected by the spell. Sonny furrowed his brow. No, none of those. Rain looked at him with envy and sighed. You're lucky, my mom and dad are like hawks. What the hell is a hawk? Something bad, I presume. He remained silent for a while, a complicated expression appearing on his face. Finally, Sonny said, Don't be hard on your mom and dad. You're the lucky one, really. I sort of twisted the truth a little. My parents don't care about where I am and what I do because I don't have parents. So, I would rather be in your situation than mine, great as it is. Yours is a bit greater. Rain stopped smiling and looked at him with a hard-to-read, sad expression on her pale face. Then, she said quietly, Oh, I see. Sorry, I didn't know. She smiled a little and waved. Well, I'll be going then. Enjoy the pasta, Sonny. The young girl put her backpack back on, turned around and left. Sonny remained on the porch for a while, staring at the tray of food. Slowly, a dark expression settled on his face. I can't continue doing nothing anymore. I need to make a decision and proceed. I wasted too much time as it is already. He avoided doing anything about getting Rain ready for the possibility of becoming infected by the spell, because he didn't know what to do and how. But this inaction had to stop. He had to come up with something. The problem was, he just didn't know enough to make a good decision. And even then, was he even qualified to make it? Sonny had a lot of experience dealing with various situations, possessed a quick wit, and was street smart, as well as having a real talent for killing things and remaining alive. Without wasting time on false modesty, he could admit that he excelled at many things. But were the things he excelled at even applicable to training a young girl for the nightmare spell? After all, what he wanted to give her were not combat skills or survival tactics, though she was being taught already, in an elite school that someone like him would have never been able to attend. What he wanted to give her was a mindset that would allow her to survive in the unforgiving hell of the dream realm. And the mind was a delicate thing. If he went about it in the wrong way, he could bring more harm than good. Not to mention that everyone was different, and what worked for him was not guaranteed to work for someone else. Take his own friends, for example. All of them had wildly diverging mindsets, but each had been able to thrive even in a place as dire and harrowing as the Forgotten Shore. So what the hell do I do? Sonny massaged his temples, then sighed. First, he had to observe more and understand more. Whatever he wanted to decide, it was stupid to try and base that decision on observing Rain for a single day as she went about her classes. Maybe I'll get inspired, or my intuition will give me a hint. With that thought, he frowned, finished his tea, and went inside. The next morning, Sonny left his house early and used the transit system to reach the district where Rain's school was located. Now that he knew the place, he didn't need to follow his sister around. Instead, he went ahead, returned to the cafe he had hidden in the last time, and sent one of his shadows to keep watch on the entrance of the school as it waited for the young girl to appear. Half an hour later, he noticed her figure and silently ordered the shadow to follow Rain inside. I am going to have to keep studying her demeanor for a while, a few weeks at least. By then, it is going to be clear if my initial impression was right, or if I need to reconsider my evaluation. I'll also understand her strengths and weaknesses much better. Sonny had to stop himself from groaning. A few weeks, that was going to really eat into his time. Both the hunt for shadow fragments and his training with Effie and Saint were going to suffer, which was such a shame. Recently, he was starting to feel a hint of confidence when handling the cruel sight in its spear form. Previously, Sonny had mistakenly considered the spear to be a rather static weapon, one mostly capable of only straightforward thrusting attacks, and on the surface, it was, More than that, this was actually one of its best features. Anyone could use a spear with a decent level of effectiveness. That was why it ruled the battlefield for thousands of years. Unlike the sword, a person didn't need endless hours of practice to become a proficient amateur with it. But in the hands of a master, the spear was a completely different beast. It was swift, deadly, and unpredictable, capable of a vast variety of attacks at a wide array of ranges. It was a truly versatile weapon capable of dealing devastating damage to anyone who would dare to approach its wielder. What Sunny liked the most, though, was how deceiving a spear could be. Cruel Sight, in particular, was especially flexible due to its long blade, which could both pierce and slash. Not to mention the fact that the length of its shaft could be changed at will. Sunny was still much more comfortable with swords, though, especially familiar ones like the Midnight Shard or the great Odachi form of the Soul Serpent. He was growing rather fond of the ability to keep his enemies further away from his body that the Cruel Sight gave him, nevertheless. So it was a real shame that he was going to have to reduce the amount of time he trained by a lot. That was not even the main reason why he felt malcontent about the prospect of spending weeks observing Rain at school, though. The main reason was teenagers. Sunny clearly remembered the mental trauma he had experienced after being forced to watch the young elites attending the prestigious school, making life difficult for both themselves and the teachers. Even after having to fall into an endless abyss while eating the rotten meat of a devil and burning in the ocean of divine flames, he would rather repeat the whole thing than experience school life again. Well, almost. Not really. With a sigh, Sunny concentrated on the pastry in front of him and prepared for a long and arduous day. That pastry alone made his mood better, simply because of the fact that it didn't come from a mimic. The young elites were the same, venomous, incredibly misguided and infuriating. Luckily, Rain was also the same. She studied quietly and avoided all the drama, which basically made her a pariah. Good girl, Rain, that's right. Disregard all the nonsense and learn as much as you can. Knowledge is a privilege. These classmates of yours are too stupid to value it, but you're not. Well, it wasn't as though they were some delinquents either. Academic achievement was the cornerstone of the social hierarchy in this elite school, so the competition among the students was fierce. It was just that most saw learning as a tool to earn status, as opposed to the goal. Not that their priorities were any of Sunny's business. Hour went after hour, and at some point he decided to leave the cafe and take a walk to chase away the boredom. But before he could, however, something happened. His communicator suddenly let out a grating, echoing ringing sound. A second later, the sound repeated. And it wasn't only just him. Every person in the cafe, from the clients to the members of the staff, was receiving the same notification. Sunny's chest grew cold. He knew that sound, of course. Everyone in the world knew and dreaded it. Looking down, he saw the familiar text appear on the screen of his communicator. No. The notification read, "Emergency alert. Emergency alert. Gate activity DATSETD in your proximity. ETA 201 seconds. Evacuate immediately. A gate, there is a gate." Before Sunny even comprehended these words, he was trembling, cold fear rising from the depths of his heart to swallow him whole. This was not a conscious response, but an instinctual reaction, something that his body had learned to do in the past, the terror that all modern humans came to bear in their very bones. The grating, echoing ringing meant only one thing: run. Run if you wish to live, if you don't want to die in a manner so harrowing that words could not describe it. But Sunny wasn't a mundane human anymore. Strangling the instinctual fear, he threw it aside and stared at the screen of the communicator with a dark expression on his face. The notification was similar to the ones he had seen several times in the past. Previously, When he lived in the outskirts, he had learned of the devastation an opening gate could bring firsthand. Wherever you lived, you were bound to hear that sound once every few years. Granted, the infrastructure in the outskirts was way less developed than in the proper parts of the city, and there wasn't a lot of awakened around, so the results were often more disastrous. He was in a very respectable district right now. But ironically, things were much worse. Sonny wasn't very versed in the technology the government used to detect the appearing gates in advance, but he knew that it failed this time. Usually, people would receive a notification at least 10 minutes, half an hour, sometimes even days before the dreaded event. This gave most of them time to evacuate out of the impact zone, and also allowed the government forces to arrive before the flood of nightmare creatures broke free of the opening gate and cut through the ranks of the nearby awakened who tried to stall it. 200 seconds, that was nothing, less than nothing. It was not nearly enough time for people to run, and not nearly enough for help to arrive. Such a small time window meant only one thing: that unless something happened, there was going to be a massacre. He was safe, though. He could just shadow step away at any moment. As people jumped to their feet and ran to the exit with panicked expressions, Sonny sighed and pressed on the notification. Immediately, a map opened up, showing him the location of where the gate was going to appear, as well as optimal evacuation routes. Too close. There was no way that Rain's school was going to be able to evacuate thousands of students in time. If their hazard protocols were well established, they were not even going to try. They would just gather the children in the most protected part of the school, activate their defense systems, and try to hold until help arrived. The school was in the direct vicinity of the opening gate, though. Sonny wasn't sure how well its defenses would do, no matter how formidable they were. Even if there were several awakened staffed as security personnel or instructors for this exact eventuality, they wouldn't be able to do much. The true elites would not take such positions, after all. What to do? This time, the notification interface was different from how Sonny had seen it in the past. There was an additional, urgently blinking symbol on the map. It was very similar to the insignia Master Jet wore on her sleeve, only this one had 2 stars on it instead of 3. This symbol was there because the communicator knew that Sonny was an awakened. There were 192 seconds remaining until the gate opened. Out in the classroom where one of his shadows was currently hiding, the children and the teacher were still staring at the notification with stunned expressions, not yet comprehending what it meant exactly, or simply refusing to. Not paying a lot of attention to the chaos happening around him, Sonny pressed on the symbol, and additional information appeared on the screen. Attention all awakened. Request immediate action. Attention all awakened. Request immediate. Below that, several lines of text shimmered. Gate category: 2 89% probability, 3 10% probability, HIGHER undefined. Strike Force ETA, 16 min 14 sec. 13 minutes. A corner of Sonny's mouth twitched, a resentful grimace appearing on his face. The earliest any government force would be able to arrive at the gate was in 13 minutes after it had opened. 13 minutes, that might as well have been an eternity. Too long. And now Sonny had to make a decision. He had to either run away or respond to the call to arms to stand in front of the nightmare gate, hopping to survive in the flood of monsters for 13 entire minutes. Well, it wasn't that hard of a decision, really. Sonny knew that he was going to stay, not out of any sort of moral obligation, but simply because he wanted to. He was equally as reluctant to turn tail and allow the spell to invade his world with impunity as he was to see countless nice, mundane humans die in the maws of nightmare creatures. Like the polite waitress who served him the delicious pastries, or the baker who had made them. This was his world, his city, and his fellow humans. Before, Sonny was always weak and had no choice but to run, hide, and tremble in fear. He was done living his life in fear a long time ago, though. He was also done allowing anyone or anything to take what was his without a bloody fight. He was done being weak. But even that wasn't the real reason. Perhaps Sonny would have considered the approaching disaster too much of a risk and retreated. But Rain was there, very near to the center of the map displaying the gate's impact zone. So really, running away wasn't even an option. 180 seconds remained. Now left alone in the empty cafe, Sonny stood up and stretched. A heavy sigh escaped from his lips. This is going to be a wild, wild ride. Now that he knew that he was insanity going to act, Sonny had to decide how exactly and do it very fast. Sadly, the question was not as easy as it seemed. His life was too complicated for anything to be easy. Not only was the answer to the question not too obvious, but what's worse, he had mere seconds to make a decision, which was not nearly enough to think things through with any sort of clarity. But what choice did he have? None at all. Sonny grimaced. Let's speedrun our options. The safest and most cowardly option was to shadow step into the classroom through the shadow, spying on Rain, grab the girl, and bring her away. At least it seemed safe on the surface. In reality, though, such an action would cause all types of terrible consequences both for him and for his sister. Not only was he going to have a lot of explaining to do, revealing all the things he wanted to keep hidden, he would also leave countless witnesses, as well as digital evidence, connecting Rain to him and vice versa. In the future, whenever he was going to end up having really dangerous enemies, which Sonny had no doubt would happen one day, soon, that evidence was going to come to light and lead them to her, which was not something he was willing to accept. So he was going to leave that option as the last resort, and act on it only if the school's defenses were breached and Rain was in imminent danger. With that out of the way, there was only one path left: doing his civic duty and going directly to the gate, in hopes of stalling the tide of nightmare creatures long enough for the cavalry to arrive. Awakened who didn't work for the government were expected and encouraged, but not technically obligated to respond to a call like that. Many, maybe even most, did not and chose to run instead. And who could blame them? Not everyone with an aspect was a combatant, and even those who were had not become one voluntarily. Forcing these already traumatized people to go to their potential deaths under the threat of retribution, if they refused, was not something the government was eager to do. Or maybe it simply couldn't. Forcing Awakened to do anything was a dangerous idea, since they could potentially topple the government if pushed too much. So the government preferred to use a carrot instead of a stick when dealing with them. It was a delicate balance. Sonny wasn't sure that he was even going to see that carrot, though, because he was facing a dilemma. Yes, he had decided to fight in front of the gate, but this could also be done in several ways. Two ways, really. Sonny could go into battle as himself, or as Mongrel, protecting his identity from prying eyes, and himself from any attention. Using Weaver's mask was not without risk, as every time he did so without proper preparations could potentially leave behind context clues that would allow smart people to narrow down the list of suspects. But the alternative, right now, with not a lot of time to weigh all the pros and cons, Sonny felt that the alternative was worse. If he wanted to have a hope of surviving for 13 minutes, he was going to have to go all out, showcasing the full scope of his true powers. That meant that all his efforts to create an image of a talented, but not too dangerous or noteworthy young Awakened were going to be destroyed. He was going to become really, really famous, and draw the eyes of entities he wanted to remain blind to his existence for as long as possible. Perhaps even worse, he was going to create one too many coincidences for Rain to continue not noticing his secret attention. It was one thing to have a quirky neighbor. If he suddenly showed up near your school in your moment of need, and turned out to be one of the most deadly awakened of his generation, though, that would most likely be enough to make her start asking questions that Sunny wasn't ready to answer. So, awakened Sunless was going to have to cowardly run away from the gate, while Mongrel was going to have to stand and fight. What a messed up situation. 170 seconds remained. Sunny sighed, knowing full well that this decision was not ideal. At the minimum, Mongrel's persona prevented him from using some of his most powerful tools, anything that people knew and associated with Sunny, no less. Like the cruel sight. Very few people had seen him use Saint, however. In fact, outside of Neff's cohort, Mordred was pretty much the only person who had. There were also the people he had fought the Lord of the Dead with, but all of them were gone now, with one notable exception. Sation was still alive and out there somewhere, in the embrace of one of the three great clans. So summoning Saint was not ideal either. Even though someone else could have received a similar echo, revealing her was really risky. He could only do it if things got really desperate. Oh, maybe I should reconsider. But there was no time to consider things anymore. There were less than 3 minutes left before the gate opened. He would just have to manage somehow. Sunny closed his eyes for a moment, then checked where the cameras monitoring the cafe were located and walked into their blind zone. There, he summoned the covetous coffer, placed his communicator on its lid, and sent the box scurrying in the direction opposite of where he himself was headed. After that, Sunny took a deep breath and dissipated into the shadows. A few seconds later, and hundreds of meters away, an armored figure wearing a fearsome black mask walked out of the darkness, the blade of the great Odachi resting on its shoulder. Mongrel had arrived at the Nightmare Gate. The road ahead of Sunny was almost empty. Only several people could still be seen, running away from the vertical line where the air was rippling strangely. 100 or so meters behind their backs, when they saw his menacing figure, the stragglers recoiled. Someone let out a frightened yelp. Not paying them any attention, Sunny calmly walked forward. The Soul Serpent rested on his shoulder. Strange, I have never seen an opening gate up close before. The deserted street in front of him did indeed look very eerie. Not only because it was almost entirely empty, both of pedestrians and of rushing PTVs, but also because light and shadows were behaving very strangely, the hue of the light slightly wrong, the movement of the shadows slightly erratic. The sound was strange, too. It was deadly quiet, but at the same time, Sunny couldn't get rid of the feeling that there were barely audible noises coming from all directions, assaulting his ears like an inaudible cacophony of muffled, distant, demented screams. There was a strange pressure rising in the air, getting stronger the closer he got to the nascent Nightmare Gate. The gate itself was easy to recognize. It looked like a tall vertical depression in the fabric of the world, a place where light refracted in unnatural ways, and the inaudible screams were the loudest, not a rift in reality yet, but a hint of one. In front of the gate, half a dozen people stood, staring at it in tense silence. The awakened who, just like Sunny, decided to answer the call. Only 6 of them. While that fact didn't promise him anything good, it was to be expected. 200 seconds was just not enough for a lot of willing defenders to arrive. Even those who were ready to risk their lives in an attempt to protect the civilians needed time to get to the gate. After all, this bunch were those who had already been in the immediate impact zone when the alert was sent to their communicators, just like Sunny. Maybe they were overly confident in their abilities, or maybe, just like him, they had people they cared about in the surrounding area, perhaps even in the very same school where Rain was, a few hundred meters behind their backs. In any case, he couldn't help but feel a bit of respect toward these people. Coming to a gate already required a lot of courage, remaining even after it became clear that there were going to be less than 10 awakened fighting side by side to stall the tide of monsters was beyond that. These people were ready to die to fulfill their duty. Fools, brave, brave fools. What about Sonny himself, then? I'm a fool, too, but a cowardly one. Sonny had no plans of dying today. He knew what he was doing and had ways to escape if things got too dire. Without slowing down even a little, he calmly walked past the 6 awakened and stopped with his back to them, closer to the gate than anyone else. Unwittingly, Sonny found himself standing at the head of the small group of defenders. Unlike them, he showed no sign of fear. The others were staring at the gate with pale faces, their bodies tense, their eyes full of unease and dark resentment. Sonny's pose, however, was confident, indifferent, almost relaxed. And in the eyes of the fearsome mask, there was nothing but darkness. The others reacted to his arrival with excitement. One more awakened to fight with them was already a good thing, but this one, in particular, looked especially imposing. His onyx armor and fearsome blade were obviously a cut above the memories they themselves had in their possession, and his calm demeanor suggested either an experienced fighter or a madman. And then someone recognized him. Wait, isn't that Mongrel? The others looked at the girl, who spoke with confusion. Who? She stared at them with wide eyes. That's Lord Mongrel. Haven't you heard of him? A hint of recognition appeared in the eyes of the awakened gathered in front of the opening gate. One of them glanced at Sonny, lingered for a moment, and asked, I am sorry, friend. This young woman seems to have heard of you. If I may ask, are you an awakened of some renown? Sonny didn't move a muscle and lied almost on autopilot. I am not an awakened. I have no renown. The man raised an eyebrow. What do you mean, not an awakened? Then who are you? Sonny cursed inwardly. My damned tongue. He gritted his teeth, remained silent for a second, and then answered in a calm tone. I am just a human. Then he sighed and turned his head slightly, staring at the 6 awakened. From the look of their memories and how they held themselves, they weren't elites. Several seemed to know how to hold a sword, but that was all. They were going to get eaten alive once the gate opened. Disheartened, he asked, Combat aspects. The defenders looked at each other, and then the girl who had recognized him answered. I have an awakened aspect that enhances my agility and allows me to strike with deadly precision. 2 guys have dormant aspects centered around endurance and strength, and the other 2 can perform ranged elemental attacks. So 3 weak combat aspects, 2 supporting fighters, and no one capable of proper support or healing. He lowered his head for a moment. There were only 30 seconds left before the gate opened. Slight tremors were running through the ground beneath his feet, and bits of dust and small pieces of gravel were slowly rising into the air, levitating on the invisible currents of energy coursing through the air. How I am going to do this? Sonny gripped the hilt of the soul serpent tighter, then said hoarsely, Stay back, kill anything that gets past me. He paused for a moment and then added, I make them bleed. The girl stared at him with wide eyes. Stay back, but sir, you can't do it alone. There will be a horde of them. Even if there were 100 of you, that wouldn't be enough to kill them all. Sonny turned away and looked at the slowly opening rift in front of him. How could he get these people to stay out of his way? The best place for them to be was at the back, finishing off anything that Sonny failed to kill and preventing the nightmare creatures from escaping into the city, escaping toward Rain's school. Failing to come up with a better lie, he opened his mouth and said coldly, One of me is enough to kill them all. With that, Sonny left the girl standing there with an open mouth and walked forward. What's the big deal anyway? It's just a nightmare gate. His legs, however, were trembling a little. Just at that moment, An especially strong tremor ran through the ground. The shadows exploded in a mad dance, the sunlight growing dim and ghostly. The wind howled through the empty street, as if the air was being sucked into the widening rift. And then an invisible shockwave spread out of it, making the windows in the surrounding building shatter. Sonny resisted the push, and suddenly felt the familiar feeling permeate his soul. The call of a nightmare. The gate had opened. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.